Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carly Rygard, and I work in the Programs Department at the Enoch Pratt Free Library. It's my pleasure to welcome you today to Lunch and Learn, hosted in partnership with the Maryland State Archives and the Maryland Four Centuries Project. Over the course of the program, you may have questions or comments that you want to share with the presenters. Please take a moment to enter them into the chat, and they will be answered during the Q&A portion at the end of today's presentation. Without further ado, I'm happy to turn things over to Owen from the Maryland State Archives.
Thank you, Carly, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Owen Lurie. I'm the Outreach Coordinator at the Maryland State Archives. These Lunch and Learn lectures are an opportunity to hear the stories of Maryland's people and to highlight the use of primary source materials and the value of archives in uncovering shared heritage. The Maryland State Archives holds records of permanent value of the state of Maryland and serves as the state's historical agency. If you are interested in exploring our records for your own research, I hope that you will come and check us out. You can contact us and schedule a research appointment on our website, msa.maryland.gov. Our program today actually comes from some of my colleagues here at the State Archives, Elaine Rice Bachmann, Christopher J. Kinzel, and Robin Gower. It is entitled Unlocking the Vault, Reopening Maryland's Old Treasury Building. And they will be giving us a sneak preview of the newly restored Old Treasury Building in Annapolis, the oldest public building in the state. It has been closed for a very long time to the public. And I, for one, am very excited to learn more about what's happening there. I hope that you will join us for next month's program on February 12th. We will have a lecture from Joseph Balkowski about Father Eugene Patrick O'Grady, a Maryland chaplain during World War II. This is the program that was originally scheduled for last November and which we had to postpone. So we are very excited to get that for you folks as well. You can find a full list of programs, including videos of past presentations, on our website. And you can, of course, find many programs from the Pratt Library at prattlibrary.org. And then we'll turn things over to our partner at the Maryland Four Centuries Project, Bert Kummerow.
Owen, and welcome everyone to the first Lunch and Learn lecture of the new year. Thanks as always to our partners, the Pratt Library and the Maryland State Archives, for continuing to make our series the very best lectures that feature new research on Maryland's amazing history. Today's lecture is exciting for all of us because it is the very first of our year-long nationwide commemoration of America's 250th birthday. Our Maryland Mosaic Project, designed to show how important our state has been throughout the nation's history, has been working with the Maryland 250th Commission as it planned this year's commemorative events. We invited Michelle Johnson, the director of the Maryland 250th Commission, who is leading the state's efforts this anniversary year, to kick off today's lecture by giving us a preview of the 250th plans. We are looking forward to a very busy year as the statewide events help us remember Maryland's significant and influential history. Please join me in welcoming Michelle Johnson.
Thank you so much, Bert. Greetings and welcome to the semi-quincentennial. In 2026, we will commemorate the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. This is a once-in-a-generation national commemoration, but with state and local execution. Maryland 250 is guided by an executive order that was signed by Governor Wes Moore in July of 2023. The vision is for an inclusive and nonpartisan statewide reflection on 250 years past that honors the contribution of all Marylanders, that unites us in purpose to serve, to engage civically, and to shape our future. This is all about unity and our future and our collaborative hope for the future. The themes of Maryland 250 are history, civics, and service. Priorities are to honor the stories and contributions of the Indigenous, free and enslaved African Americans, youth, new Americans, and lifelong learners. There are local and regional 250 commissions that have launched throughout Maryland in all but one county. The best way to get involved is locally. You can find contact information for your local 250 commission on the Get Involved page of the Maryland 250 website. Communities throughout Maryland are joining national initiatives such as Two Lights for Tomorrow, which commemorates the 250th anniversary of the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere, the 250th anniversary of the U.S. military, America's Potluck, which will be on July 5th. This is an initiative from Utah inviting communities to host a community meal. In Maryland, we're encouraging incorporating Maryland foods and recipes. Also, Sharing the Spirit of America on July 8th at 6 p.m. is a national initiative from Hawaii, calling for a simultaneous reading nationwide of the Declaration of Independence. In Maryland, we are encouraging reading additional documents and a recommitment ceremony for elected officials and the public to recommit to what we aspire to be as a nation. There are programs that are in development now, which will be great opportunities for Marylanders. The Maryland 250 Civics Moonshot, the Maryland 250 Freedom of the Press Project, Maryland 250 Revolutionary Baseball. We encourage you to attend a Citizen Academy in your community to learn about national firsts that happened in Maryland through the Maryland Mosaic. Play the Maryland State Lottery Maryland 250 game that will launch later this year, and to sign up for the Maryland State Parks 250 Miles for Maryland Challenge. There will be new books in development, one from the archives on the Maryland 400 and a coffee table photo book from Maryland Public TV. And the commission is even working on some international partnerships and an online merchandise store. This 2026 will be a great year to visit museums and historical sites around Maryland and attend events not only on July 4th, but all year long. Two big opportunities in August. One, to join the commission in Brooklyn, New York on August 22nd to honor the 250th anniversary of the Maryland 400 in the Battle of Brooklyn. And also, there will be a new monument honoring Black Revolutionary War patriots at the State House. On behalf of the commission, I invite and encourage you to learn more about the semi-quincentennial in Maryland by visiting our website, watching our 2-minute video, and exploring the great programs, events, places, and stories from throughout Maryland. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, and good luck to you and the 250th Commission. Now, Maryland is among the leaders in historic firsts, not only in the state, but also in the nation. If you go to our Maryland Mosaic website, which is www.marylandmosaic.org, you will see how we have discovered 150 firsts that have created a mosaic of a small state with a big history over 250 years. These firsts will be featured in the 2026 Lunch and Learn lecture series. Today, we will visit one of Maryland's most historic sites. State House Hill in downtown Annapolis has been a political center for colonial, state, and national affairs for over 300 years. Busy daily activities continue to roll in and around a unique domed state house, and that state house is the oldest of its kind in continuous use in the country. This state house was also the national capital during the early days of the U.S. Republic. The Maryland State Archives is responsible with other state agencies for the preservation and interpretation of the State House and its environs. It supervises the Maryland Commission on Artistic Properties and works closely with state officials on the State House Trust. The difficult task they face is maintaining a museum in the original State House with some of the state and nation's most precious artifacts, while the General Assembly continues to run the modern business of Maryland in an early 20th century edition. Today, we are lucky to have 3 veterans of the Maryland State Archives and the Commission on Artistic Properties as our speakers. Together, they have half a century of experience with the historic business in the State House. Elaine Rice Bachmann, our 5th state archivist since 2021, began her archive career as a curator of the State House Artistic Collection. Elaine is the first woman to hold the position of State Archivist. Chris Kinzel, the Director of the Artistic Commission, has also been a curator working on all manner of tasks, from monumental paintings to bronze replicas of famous Marylanders. And Robin Gower, the newest member of this team, is a present curator working with the governor and other state officials to keep the State House Museum up to date and welcoming to visitors while modern politics flow through the building. I can honestly say that I have known and worked with this group for decades and can't think of a better team to keep this delicate operation running smoothly. Today, our speakers will discuss a small, unassuming structure on State House Hill. They have developed a wonderful use for Maryland's oldest public building. This year, they are unlocking the story of the Old Treasury Building and also telling the tale of how Maryland's capital moved from the 17th century into the 18th century. Please join me in welcoming Elaine, Chris, and Robin and their wonderful operation, the Maryland State Archives.
Thank you so much, Bert. And thank you to Michelle as well. I'm so honored to serve as a Maryland 250 Commissioner and to have a role in shaping how our state will commemorate America's semi-quincentennial, especially as I reflect on how much the bicentennial of 1976 impacted me as an 8-year-old in Southern Indiana. To be here in Maryland, so rich in the history of the Revolutionary War period, is a tremendous opportunity to educate and share stories from many perspectives. And the State House and its grounds, including the building, which is our topic today, really are at the heart of Maryland's revolutionary story. In fact, the State House is also celebrating its 250th anniversary, as it was literally being built during the years of the Revolutionary War. The cornerstone was laid in 1772 by Maryland's last royal governor, Robert Eden, and by the time of its completion in 1779, the building was presided over by Maryland's first popularly elected governor, Thomas Johnson. So the building itself represents Maryland's evolution from colony to state. And all the while, another building, described in 1783 by a visitor from Germany like this. Oh, are our slides up? There we go. Next, the State House is a little building of one story meant for the public treasury. It is said to be a very strong and fast building. Doors and windows I saw well barred and fixed. Today, of course, we refer to this building as the Old Treasury Building, the oldest public building in Maryland, completed in 1737. But it was for nearly 2 centuries just the Treasury Building, and was surely a very busy place for government officials and local people as the center of the colony and then the state's commerce. You'll hear more about the function of the building from Chris and Robin, but getting to where we are today, about to reopen it, has been a long process that really was set on its course with the adoption of the State House Visitor Experience Master Plan in 2027. In 2007, In 2007, the Old Treasury had already been closed for several years after its original uses were supplanted by newer buildings, even though it did undergo a very significant restoration between 1949 and 1951. It was never really publicly accessible, serving as leased office space and then being closed entirely. So when the archives initiated with the State House Trust a study to plan how to improve the visitor experience of the State House, which as a National Historic Landmark receives hundreds of thousands of visitors annually, we included the Old Treasury Building in the plan, seeking to secure its future for public access. We engaged the services of New York-based C&G partners who worked closely with us to create a plan that would transform the public areas of the State House into world-class museum spaces, which are expected by visitors in such an important building. And since 2007, the state has been chipping away at implementing this plan through multiple capital improvement projects. And just to give you a very brief overview of that plan, as you can see in the floor plan, It is predicated on the theme that visitors can experience 4 centuries of history in the State House. Many of you, if you're familiar with coming into the State House, know that the 18th century history is explored in our very historic Old Senate Chamber where Washington resigned his commission. Across the hall, you can walk into the restored Old House of Delegates chamber as it appeared in the late 19th century, and where so much progress was made through legislation over that century. And that is where you experience the statues of Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman. Of course, the 20th century itself is represented in the annex that was built in 1904 and 1905, which holds the current Senate chambers, which of course are where our legislature meets today, bringing in the 21st century. But it was outside in the Old Treasury Building that we were to create the link to the 17th century Maryland history and the founding of the colony, including exploring the move of the capital from St. Mary's City to Annapolis in the late 17th century. We intended that this would be interpreted in the Old Treasury Building. And so the current restoration and interpretation represents implementing this last portion of the project, the master plan identified in 2007. And here I want to acknowledge the State House Trust in first adopting that plan and then staying committed to funding it through 4 gubernatorial administrations and changeover in all leadership positions. This has been a significant financial commitment to preserving Maryland history, preserving not only the building, but allowing us to interpret it with exhibits. And this was truly a vision of the late Senate President Mike Miller and the late Speaker Mike Bush. And it has been supported, it was initially supported by the administration of Governor Bob Ehrlich, and it has been supported all the way through bipartisan support to the administration of Westmore. President Ferguson and Speaker Emeritus Jones are also to be thanked for following through on the trust's commitment to the building and grounds. The Old Treasury Building project, along with all the capital projects to restore the interior State House, have been multi-agency efforts led by the Department of General Services in partnership with the Maryland Historical Trust and the Archives, along with multiple contractors. And I want to acknowledge and sincerely thank these partners for their collaboration and dedication. So before I turn it over to Chris and Robin, here are some quick facts about the Old Treasury Building. Why did the state need the Treasury Building? That was to store currency and records for the colony and later the state of Maryland. And in fact, its original building name is as the Paper Currency Office. Who built it? It was constructed by Patrick Cray between 1735 and 1737. It was in use continuously by the state until 1903. Then it served various purposes until it closed to the public in 1993. When did we begin the restoration? In 2023. And here again, I want to call out the Department of General Services, who included in the very large-scale project to restore the exterior facade of the State House, funding to also restore the Old Treasury Building. Its exterior has been restored to its 18th century appearance, and its interior is fitted for exhibits. When will it open? Very soon, we assure you. We are conducting the final lighting checks and the final installations. We really hope it'll be open to the public very shortly, if not by the end of January, certainly in early February. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues, Chris and Robin.
Hello, everyone. Sorry about that. As Elaine had mentioned, my name is Robin Gower. I'm very excited to be here and start part of this presentation, picking up where Elaine had picked off, including how the Capitol has moved from historic St. Mary's City to Annapolis today. So it's why this building is here, really. The land that we know today as Maryland was first inhabited by Native peoples, including the Accomaco, who were speakers of an Eastern Algonquin language. Upon their arrival, the English quickly established their first settlement of St. Mary's City and built their first state house in 1676. And this is where all government activities in the colony would take place. As Maryland grew, so did the needs of the colony. The Lords Baltimore, who were governing from afar, wanted a more connected Maryland. They envisioned markets and towns to really drive trade both domestically and internationally, and also defend the border against encroaching settlers coming down from Pennsylvania. So to push their vision forward, they hired a new colonial governor, or appointed, I should say, a new colonial governor, Francis Nicholson, and he arrived in 1694. He believed that Maryland needed a new capital, one more strategically located and with more convenient shipping channels to support this vision of a greater trade. So Nicholson advocated for the move of Maryland's capital from St. Mary's City north to Anne Arundel town. That fall, the General Assembly approved that move and soon renamed the town Annapolis as we know it today. A modest brick state house was completed here in 1698. Now, this state house was only in use for 6 years before it was unfortunately destroyed by a fire in 1704. But we built a second state house on the same spot, and that was completed in 1707. And it's during this period of the second state house that the Old Treasury was built about 30 years later.
So I'm Chris Kinzel, and I've been fortunate to be at the state for 21 years, and we've always been talking about opening the Treasury Building, so I'm very excited to finally come to the final stretch to have it open. But anyway, so the history of the Old Treasury Building predates the structure itself. By the early 1700s, many of the other colonies were starting to issue their own paper currency. However, Charles Calvert, Lord Baltimore, was not really in favor of this idea because he was worried about his own personal financial losses that he might incur. So the lack of a readily available standard currency put Maryland's economy on a strain, and Maryland's General Assembly demanded action. There were attempts as early as 1729 for paper currency to be issued, but it took until 1733 for a bill to pass to finally put paper money into circulation. This act was read, an act for emitting and making current 90,000 pounds current money of Maryland in bills of credit. This act also included numerous aspects detailing the administrative, logistical, and total management of this newly created office to make sure Maryland's new paper currency was secure and ran efficiently and effectively. But of course, with this creation of this new office and new law, a new building would have to be constructed. And as Elaine mentioned, the building started in 1735 and was finally completed in 1737. Actually, it was definitely made to be secure features by its construction of two thick brick masonry walls, as well as a stone masonry foundation. It was also had brick masonry vaulted spanning vaults that spanned over two of the interior rooms. This would provide not only extra security, but also a method of, at that time, fireproof construction. It also included barred and shuttered windows and heavy plank doors to reflect the need for extra security for this new and important office. So, as I mentioned, this act also included the role of appointing commissioners, and there were three that were appointed by the governor in charge of managing all aspects related to paper currency, from its issuance to accounting and even security. The rules were stated as they were expected to numbering and signing of bills, comparing bills to their ledger counterparts, distributing bills, keeping good, accurate accounts of all transactions, participating in audits, inspecting and examining all mortgages and bonds, securing loans of bonds, exchanging damaged bills and recording the transactions and destroying the damaged bill, and protecting the currency and ledgers by being kept in two iron chests. Commissioners weren't the only ones that were in the building. There were also clerks that were hired staff who also helped facilitate the work of the commissioners and for emitting bills of credit. They were the ones that did a lot of the recording and research and corresponding to the offices required. Here you see actually an early attempt dealing with a watermark, and this was one of the first times that this actually happened with paper money in the state or the colony. So this act also called for that these newly issued bills of credit would be stored in these large iron chests. And it's kind of unique here. You see here there are 2 padlocks and a lock up top. Each commissioner was given charge of a key each to help with the ensure security and no one would be corrupt in trying to take over, any wrongness with managing the state's money. So each commissioner, so the only way you have access to the iron chest is if all 3 commissioners were present at the same time. And an extra feature was these padlocks were also a 2-lock configuration. Not only did you have to put the key into the lock, but then you had to do another countermeasure to push it in further and then turn it clockwise or counterclockwise, and that would disengage the lock. So they really went through, lots of extra steps for not only securing the currency, but also when it came to the actual anti-counterfeit measures as well, which was a major concern of theirs. And that was actually one of the concerns that Lord Baltimore had as well. So much so that when they were actually in England, each of the plates that were issued to do the printing when it was first done in England were actually kept in their own individual iron chests as well in London. So one thing, an extra step they did was when they issued the bills of credit, they would create a weighty cut, and one side would be kept, one part would be kept by the commissioners and clerks, and the other one would be issued to the individual. And when they came time to come back to collect money, they had to make sure that the parts lined up. So you really get a sense that they really did their best to try and prevent any means of counterfeiting this new form of paper currency. And there's lots of issuances of people trying to break into the Treasury Building and also to steal the money, and that'll be more explained in detail at the exhibit itself.
So the first bills, as Chris was saying, were made and printed in England and brought to the colonies. But later, starting in 1756, Maryland was starting to print their own currency domestically here in Annapolis. Guidance was provided on exactly how many bills to print, how many bills to circulate, who should be the ones signing them, what information specifically should be on this bill. And actually, all printing had to be done in the presence of one of the commissioners. It was written that presence of one or more of the commissioners or trustees of the loan office of this province who are hereby required to direct and be present. So there was no one ever alone with the currency at any time. And so the currency was printed, as I said, engraver Thomas Sparrow of Annapolis, printed first by Jonas Green, later Anne Catherine Green and her sons, who had that printing contract. And one of the things they did to make each of the bills unique as far as differing the bills and different years and currency is they would take a leaf or a flower and put that into the mold. And that would make almost like a snowflake, right? This unique impression into the bill. And this process was known as nature printing. And it was a process that had been popularized by Benjamin Franklin in the late 1730s. And so this was another way to protect the bills from being counterfeited. So there is so much that we cannot wait to share with you all about this building beyond just the themes of currency and really what occurred in this building over the course of 200 years. We simply don't have time to cover all of that today, but we do hope you'll come by and see the exhibits quite soon when they do open. But speaking of exhibits, we wanted to just give like a quick overview of what that exhibit process looks like in case you were not aware, and get a little sneak peek of some of the aspects of the exhibit too. Exhibits take years to be pulled together. It's a multi-stage collaborative process that culminates in the creation of what the visitor sees and experiences. if we've done our job right, you won't realize or notice the countless hours of debate that were had over font and how the lighting just perfectly illuminates that panel, where and why an object was placed specifically in that spot, and the concise, hopefully typoless labels and text that you see before you. Broadly speaking, we can break down the development of an exhibit into several categories, and also should note that not all of these categories happen successively. Some of these categories overlap and are occurring concurrently. And as Elaine had mentioned earlier as well, this portion of the project that I'm describing here does not incorporate really the work that was completed by the Department of General Services, Maryland Historic Trust, and all of their partners, including the architect, Meeson Cohen Wilson Baker, and the general contractors, the Chrisman Company, and the work of actually restoring physical building itself to be a space in which we can hold these exhibits. One of the first stages, though, is research. What exactly is going in this building, in this exhibit? Comprehensive research is done, reviewing primary source documentation, assessing what objects are there, figuring out what objects could tell the stories that we're hoping to describe. And that's going to help guide the content of what will go into the building. We'll also look at concept and design. What does the exhibit look like? What is a visitor's experience when we come when they come through? What are we hoping they're going to see, engage with, how they might feel? In this process, as we worked with the firm C&G Partners to develop the design. Also, we have media in the exhibit. You'll see a 6-minute video that's really going to describe further the move of the Capitol from St. Mary's City to Annapolis. And the same process kind of happens. What's the storyline? What are the images that support that? And what are the graphics that make that video interesting and engaging to a visitor? Once the designs are all finalized, it's time to actually bring them to life. So this stage is called fabrication. We worked with Capitol Museum Services to not only just print the exhibit panels, but to construct the items that you will physically see within the exhibit, whether that's a reconstructed object or a case for the iron chest. And one of the last stages is probably one of my favorites, which is installation. This is where all of the parts come together and we physically put them within the building. This is also a chance to see if there's any last corrections or changes or modifications that we might want to do, since we actually get to see everything all together, usually for the first time, all in one place. And then it's time to open once everything is finalized with installation. Now, since we don't want to spoil too much related to the exhibit, I can't share too many images, but I do want to highlight a couple details that shows kind of some of the thought that goes behind the exhibit. For a number of reasons, including accessibility and also the size of the building, it's quite small. It was decided that we would predominantly use recreated objects rather than historic pieces. And it was a fun and unique challenge to get to work with designers and carpenters, even 3D printers, to figure out how we would take an existing object and recreate that into something new and for an exhibit. So in one case, when we're looking at drawer handles, this is a actual drawer pull from an 18th century piece. And this is how the carpenters translated that. So the drawers will not be functioning. So we didn't want to be confusing with the pulls. But we still wanted it to visually look like a drawer pull. So this is what they came up with, which I think is fabulous. Here is an image of one of the locks that is on a ledger book. Again, I guess it's more of a clasp, but it was a way to keep the book together. And you can see this beautiful carved detail that is in this metalwork. And again, to get to work with designers as well as 3D printers to get this to then translate into a 3D printed object. I think you really get the essence of the original with the work that you will get to see as part of the exhibit. But there is one piece that is original, and it's the only piece really original to that building that we get to display for you all, and that's the iron chest.
Yes, so as Robin said, we kind of 2.5 years ago, Rob and I, when we were doing our annual inventory, up at the Maryland Center for History and Culture, we kind of rediscovered this iron chest that was has been on deposit since the 1920s from Maryland to the then Maryland Historical Society, and been on display ever since. And we looked at it more closely, and we thought, wow, this would be so cool if we could have this be brought back to the state and actually be incorporated into our new Treasury Building, well, the reopening of the Treasury Building. So we were very excited about that. But of course, there was some time, needed some help being conserved, because over time it just had lost some of its luster and sheen, and there was some other blemishes that need to be corrected. So with the generosity of the Friends of the Maryland State Archives and the Maryland Department of General Services, funds were provided to help conserve the iron chest and make it much more presentable for its public display for the first time in forever. Not for the first time in the Old Treasury Building. So we were able to work with Diane Fulwick and Lori Tershheim of Baltimore to work on conserving the iron chest. So here you just see Lori is doing some work on just clearing up some of the blemishes. And one of the cool things that we found was this in the upper corner on the back. You see it's a bit of a watermark, a maker's mark or stamp. It looks like of a crown. We haven't yet been able to identify where it's from or who the maker was, but we know it was, it came from England and potentially Bristol, or which is a port right outside London. But we know it's from London and England, English made. So it'd be great if we can maybe try and, as research and time allows, to figure out when it who made it. But we know that it arrived in Annapolis as early as 1734, because in May is when the first account ledgers are being written to the iron chest accounts, and you'll be able to see a lot more of that when the building opens, and there'll be more detail about that. But this is just so thankful that we're actually able to include this important iron original object. And it's really cool because it really hits home the idea of when you see it, how large it is, how difficult it would have been to move or steal, as there would also, you might imagine, numerous attempts to actually break into the Treasury Building. But the fact that you really hits home interpretively the 3 locks that were necessary for each commissioner to have, so that in order to access the iron chest, you needed all 3 keys to actually open it. So we're hopefully, we'll have this available to everyone to see in the very, very near future.
Did you want to discuss, Chris, or mention the locksmith, how working with them in that process?
Yeah, well, it was neat that process to work. We definitely appreciate the Maryland Center for History and Culture making their site available for the actual work to take place. And it's been a great partnership with them, so they can, they've been great stewards of this as well. But one of the unique things we found during this period was we were actually we had one of the keys, and we were able to actually unlock one of the padlocks. And we're in the process of trying to open up the other padlock, but we're working with a locksmith to get to that process. So hopefully we'll be able to have it opened as far as to see what's inside. We know nothing's inside it, but just to kind of see the inner workings, if there's anything inside that would be unique or help more with interpretation that we can show in some type of other method. Was there something else you wanted to say, Robin?
No, I think that was, I can't believe that, it feels like this project has been in process for so much, for a long time, and we're really excited to get it open and for visitors to see and interact with the space.
And with that, we're really happy to answer questions.
Hi, great. Folks, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. I can't speak for the entire audience, though we are getting some great positive feedback here. And I know I myself am also just excited just to see this much of the Old Treasury Building. We have a couple of questions. One thing is, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about some of those break-in attempts, because I think that's something people would be really interested in hearing more about.
Robin, do you want to talk about one of your favorite ones?
Sure. It's interesting to think about how the idea of, I'm glad we had the image of with Lori working on the piece, so you could see how large that iron chest is, because it does weigh a substantial amount, and it's solid and it's quite heavy, but this still doesn't prevent people from thinking they could just steal it. So one of the times it's recorded that they tried to undermine the foundation and basically dig a hole and try to drag the iron chest out. They are unsuccessful because the chest is just too large to manage and pull back through a hole. I believe there's another report of somebody trying to come down the chimney to try to break into the building. So there's reports of people attempting still to counterfeit the bills. So even though there were security and measures in place, people definitely still were trying to access this building. So it really explains why this building needed these thick barred windows and strong masonry to protect its contents.
Yeah, they also made post in the Maryland Gazette, asking for people to, if they have any information on people that were, for break-ins as well. So there was lots of attempts, but nothing really, very few successes of actually getting to the building, but not really taking anything. But fascinating to see those accounts in the Maryland Gazette.
Absolutely. Thank you. How much does the iron chest weigh? Do we know?
That one was estimated to be about 1,200 pounds.
Ooh. Okay, so that's not getting out of the building without too much work.
No.
We have another question about when the building is going to be open, like what its hours are, and whether there will be some sort of a opening ceremony for the building.
Well, the intention is that the building will be open the same hours that the State House is open. So most people know the State House is open every day with a photo ID from 8:30 to 5. And the protocol will be that this building will also be open during those hours. The reason the exhibits are so durable and there aren't original period objects is because it will be largely a self-guided experience. Once we have the building open to the public, whether there'll be any sort of a ceremony to open that, I expect that there will be, and it's obviously on public grounds. So we'll try to let folks know when that is, and if anyone wants to be a part of that, hopefully they can.
Wonderful, thank you. The last question that I have is whether there was anything new that we learned as part of this. I know you talked about some new bits and pieces, but were there other new exciting discoveries about our state's history that we came across?
I would say I think the thing I learned that I found was fascinating was just all the aspects, all the detail that I previously didn't know about that went into making sure of all the anti-counterfeit measures that were taking place about creating this paper currency. That to me was like really fascinating. The whole fact that there were actually these security protocols were also implemented not just in the colony, but also in London, where they were actually printing the paper currency. So that to me was kind of unknown, or not the actual level of detail and thought that was placed at this time period into securing the currency was to me fascinating, and that's can't wait to share it with the rest of the people, with everybody.
Well, thank you so much for a really fascinating discussion today. I know folks are really looking forward to getting a chance to see this.
And can I take one more moment before we
yes,
close?
absolutely.
Just to acknowledge that in some of the imagery you saw today of the original paper currency, I really want to give a shout out to our special collections here at the Maryland State Archives. We now probably have the largest collection of original Maryland paper currency in our special collections, and that is largely due to the lifelong collecting effort of Will Mumford, a local historian here in Annapolis. And the gift of his collection is really enabling us to digitize these images and make them accessible in the place where this original currency was really first used and handled. So I just really want to thank Will Mumford's family for making that collection accessible to us. It really is going to help us tell the story of the paper currency office.
Absolutely, and thank you for that addition, Elaine. I've seen that collection, and it truly is a remarkable set of materials. Thank you all again so much today. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We hope that we will see you again next month.